Assassin's Creed. Or, in other words, this franchise that Ubisoft milked into the ground over the past, decade and a half. It has been one of the biggest names in the industry that has taken players to numerous historical time periods like ancient Egypt, the French Revolution, that time when they stilled the chicken legend at McDonald's. But Assassin's Creed has struggled a lot with consistency. For every sick bit of parkour, there's been some terrible writing or some glitchy monstrosity, and my task is to rank all of these from worst to best. And yeah, there's been some amazing games, but there's also been some real shit. Who knows what we'll end up with? So what could the worst Assassin's Creed game actually be? Because the franchise has had its dark days for sure, but the really infamous ones aren't that bad, surely. Yeah, that's pretty much the case, because Assassin's Creed Memories is a mobile card game, a very strange direction for the franchise to go in, and with really bland mechanics that aren't fully realised and a general disconnect from the mainline games, it is comfortably the worst Assassin's Creed game you could ever hope to play. In fact, it was so bad it was quickly shut down and forgotten, as if Ubisoft themselves were ashamed of what they'd done. Maybe they should be. Altair's Chronicles is a prequel to the original Assassin's Creed, but on the DS, which is a fun idea for a portable Assassin's Creed, but the limitations of the console meant that the controls were clunky and the combat felt borderline unresponsive at times. Also, for a prequel, there is nothing of note to gain from this story. It feels like a non-canon side story than what is supposed to be a fairly significant prequel. Assassin's Creed Multiplayer Rearmed is another weird mobile game experiment, but now it's got multiplayer for some reason. Multiplayer in other Assassin's Creed games has been really fun, but this is a strangely diluted version of what makes that multiplayer so good. You know, it's a cool idea, but it was too basic and it got boring really quickly. Clearly, Ubisoft loves random card games for Assassin's Creed, since Recollection is another one that barely feels like Assassin's Creed. It is kind of okay, and it's definitely better than Memories, but it just doesn't do anything for anyone at any point in time. At this point, I would be genuinely surprised if anyone still remembers this game. The Assassin's Creed Chronicles games are actually really interesting and have their own distinct visual style, and they were around for long enough that we will be seeing more of these as we go. For now though, Russia is the worst by some distance because the environments are dull and lifeless and the level design is not up to scratch by anyone's standards. It is going for more of a desolate feel to the environments, but it ends up feeling a lot more unfinished than I think it was supposed to be. You can sense they can do better, and they absolutely can, but not for a little while. Assassin's Creed Bloodlines deserves some immediate credit because it brought Altair back to tell some more of his story. Sadly, it doesn't deserve much more than that. It is on the PSP, and having portable Assassin's Creed is a fun novelty, and it is kind of impressive for the hardware at the time. Unfortunately though, the controls are dumb, and the camera angles make me sick, so it's not that great. It is a compromise, and I don't want to compromise that hard, so yeah. It might seem like we're getting all the portable mobile games out of the way at the start, and that's just the nature of squeezing a game onto a mobile device that doesn't quite fit. Assassin's Creed Rebellion is at least kinda cool. It plays a little bit like Fallout Shelter, and it's a fun idea to have this kind of game with an Assassin's Creed filter slapped on top of it. There's not a lot of depth here at all, which is annoying because it is kinda fun, but just not for very long. Does look kinda cute though, I'm not gonna lie. I told you we'd be back to Assassin's Creed Chronicles, and the India game is a lot more interesting visually. There's loads of beautiful colours and some really nice environments to explore, and that coupled with a lot more refinement as a game than Russia makes it a lot more fun to play. However, the gameplay itself is still a little bit too stiff and awkward to be all that fun for that long. It is a nice sign of progress though, we're building to something eventually. We haven't seen any pirates yet, should we talk about some pirates now? It's not time for Black Flag yet, don't worry, but they have made, you guessed it, another mobile game based around naval combat. Assassin's Creed Pirates is honestly pretty fun and an enjoyable way to play one of the more iconically fun parts of Assassin's Creed. And I do like the ambition on display here. You can get a surprisingly large amount out of this game for what little there is of it. However, there is still only so much you can do as a mobile game. It doesn't really have much of a connection to the franchise, and it's basically Assassin's Creed in name only, but, you know, at least it's kind of fun. If you want a game that is more closely related to the main series, Assassin's Creed Identity is probably the place to go. It has similar levels of ambition as Pirates, but channels it towards being a more traditional Assassin's Creed kind of game, with more depth than I think you'd ever expect. There's customizable assassins, there's open world missions, there's honestly the recipe here for a really strong mobile game. It is, however, a mobile game, which means not only is there a compromise on quality, it's also very grindy and has incredibly repetitive quests, coupled with some shaky touch controls that really need more refinement, and it's almost like a free trial of a mainline Assassin's Creed game, but just lacking quite a lot of quality. And speaking of lack of quality, it's about time we had a main series game now, and even though the franchise isn't in the best place right now, it is at least a little bit healthier than it was when Syndicate came out. I'll be honest, there's still loads to enjoy here, like Victorian London is really fun to explore and is beautifully detailed, and when you're given protagonists that are this enjoyable and they have their own distinct playstyles, it can be a lot of fun to play through this game. Just so long as you keep things stealthy, because the combat, the actual, people have found you combat, is really unsatisfying. It feels like you're being punished too harshly for not doing things stealthily, so now you have to just button mash until they die. All of Syndicate ends up feeling kinda boring, which is something that no Assassin's Creed game should be. The line between Assassin's Creed Syndicate and Unity is very small indeed. They're both plagued by series fatigue, and you can't really shake off the feeling that you've seen all of this before, but better? And it's a shame because Unity takes you to Paris, which is again done so beautifully with environmental design just off the scale. But not only is Unity kind of boring, but the launch was famously terrible because it was full of glitches and, a lot of people didn't like that. The reason why it's a little higher though is because it's had some patches since then and the game is actually really solid now. Unity does deserve a little bit more credit, but it has left a bit of a lasting scar. Assassin's Creed 2 Discovery is a fancy little side story that expands on Ezio's story. We haven't talked about him yet. It is surprisingly smooth for a DS game with fast platforming and combat and a real sense of polish that you don't often get with these kind of games. However, like a lot of these weird side story prequel things, the story doesn't feel that important. It's a nice experiment, but it does feel a little bit unnecessary. It's a movement in the right direction, but we're still not quite hitting home with the full Assassin's Creed experience. Assassin's Creed Rogue is such an underrated game which I really wish was better. It flips the perspective. You're not playing as an assassin, you're playing as a Templar hunting down the assassins. Honestly, such a cool concept, and I really wish they expanded on it more, but it got released alongside Unity and got overshadowed by all of the glitches that game had, so it kind of just didn't really get off the ground very well. But naval gameplay returned and was amazing, so it's kind of like a mix of Assassin's Creed 4 and 3, but more compact and focused, and honestly, you should try it, it's really fun. Assassin's Creed Valhalla is the kind of game I always thought I wanted when these games were getting really repetitive. Setting one of these games in Norway is so unique and lends itself to really beautiful environments and a wonderful world for you to explore. The world is part of the problem though, since it's so big that it somehow manages to feel devoid of stuff to do, while the stuff that is here all starts to blend together after a while. The raids are cool, but even they wear thin eventually. Call it the Ubisoft problem if you like. The China flavor of Assassin's Creed Chronicles is as good as this subset of games became. The big plus is that it looks gorgeous with that ink painting art style, and Xiao Yun is a cool character with some slick animations that work perfectly with this kind of aesthetic. The problem is, once the novelty wears off, it is kinda shallow and repetitive compared to the main games. It can only offer you so much before you start to run into a lot of the same kind of stuff. It's fun for a few hours, but it doesn't really stick with you, and I feel like this game had a real chance of leaving a lasting impression. Assassin's Creed 3 Liberation deserves some credit for giving us the first female assassin, Evelyn, and the setting of New Orleans is a nice change of pace as well. The persona system, where you disguise yourself to blend in with different social classes, is a nice idea too, and I'd like to see it expanded on. The trouble is, it never really reaches the highs of the mainline games since the story feels uneven, and being made for the PS Vita means it's a bit clunky and scaled down and maybe not working to its fullest potential. Not a bad game, just one that feels a bit too much like a side dish rather than the main course, and it could probably be a main course. Like steak or something, I don't know. If I told you that Freedom Cry started life as DLC for Black Flag, I think you'd believe me, since that's exactly how this game feels. More of the same, just on a much smaller scale. That's still a pretty good thing though, since Adewale is one of the stronger main characters in the franchise, and the story pulls zero punches with a meaningful tale about slavery. It is all over and done with fairly quickly though, which I remember being disappointed by, and honestly, apart from its theming, Freedom Cry doesn't try to do anything too exciting. Like the gameplay, it's a little bit samey. I guess you'd expect that from a spin-off, but if the story is so ambitious, I wish the rest of the game was. In the mid-2010s, Assassin's Creed was badly in need of a reset. Ubisoft were pumping out one of these a year, and they weren't very good, so instead, they prioritized quality over quantity for the first time in a while, and out fell Assassin's Creed Origins. It is a bit more of an RPG than a stealth action game, and you do notice how much this game moves away from stealth. But what is here is still done incredibly well. Ancient Egypt is a seamless fit for this kind of game, and it's a time period that is well used in its story. It is a refreshing take on Assassin's Creed, and one that can be a lot of fun, so long as you don't get too bogged down with level requirements and a near infinite raft of side quests. The grinding is real, and there's a lot of it if you're not being careful. And annoyingly, this is much the same case with Assassin's Creed Odyssey as well. Generally, Odyssey takes everything from Origins and makes it bigger and better, and in some cases like the explorable map, yeah, that's not necessarily a good thing. It's huge to the point of being too much, and really stretching what works and what doesn't work about modern Assassin's Creed. That being said, everything else is kind of wonderful. The RPG systems have been expanded, you've got more options in dialogue trees now, and Cassandra and the guy who isn't Cassandra both make for really entertaining protagonists. If you can get on board with all of this, it's a great game, but it's also a lot of game. I have a full-time job, Ubisoft, come on now. All of this is hilarious timing because Assassin's Creed Mirage reads like an apology from Ubisoft for making these games too massive. It's made by the Bordeaux branch of Ubisoft, which brings with it some fresh ideas that also lean into that classic brand of Assassin's Creed that puts more of an emphasis onto the kind of stealth that had me fall in love with this franchise in the first place. It isn't anything groundbreaking or mind-blowing, but it is a reminder of what these games can be boiled down to when we're not trying to be too extravagant. It feels like a fan-made spiritual successor, and I mean that in the most flattering way possible. It may be a controversial opinion, but when VR is done well, it should be celebrated as such, because it can be the most immersive way to experience a game. Assassin's Creed for Nexus VR is maybe not the absolute best use of virtual reality ever made, but it is able to deliver all the sneaking, the climbing, and the stabbing within a first-person perspective that is so goddamn addictive. Yes, the audience for this kind of game is very small and it didn't sell well, so Ubisoft aren't making any more VR games for a while, but it's something you gotta try at least once in your life. It's like Mirror's Edge, but with knives. The original Assassin's Creed has been through just about every different version of revisionist history. Series debuts rarely grow older without aging like an old banana, and I would classify Assassin's Creed 1 as one of those games that may have been revolutionary at a time but are now hard to love all these years later. It is incredibly repetitive with missions that all smush together, and the controls feel clunky and unrefined, which is particularly egregious for an Assassin's Creed game. However, you cannot put a price on how you felt at the top of the first really tall building you climbed with all of this game laid out in front of you. Or how about the first time you stabbed a man with the hidden blade and then flawlessly slipped out of sight? The concepts in Assassin's Creed are insane, and they were strong enough to fuel an entire mega franchise, so yeah, I gotta give it its flowers. Oh, you know we're back when this year's Assassin's Creed is actually really good. Never before has Ubisoft turned to ninjas and samurais to freshen up their assassin stealth action franchise, but we finally got there with Assassin's Creed Shadows, and I fuck with this game so hard. There's some natural gameplay variants with the playable characters, since you've got options that encourage both a more modern heavy hitting playstyle and also a more agile stealthy approach as well. The story is messy, there's no getting away from that, but I will always take these kind of big ideas and beautiful worlds, however they come. I'm not sure if this is still the case, but there was a time when Assassin's Creed 3 was one of the most divisive games in the series. It tells a riskier story during the American Revolution with iffy pacing, but the ambition is through the ceiling and halfway to Mars in this one, since this is where naval combat came in. And for 2012, this is a pretty incredible open world. Also, AC3 deserves a huge amount of credit for making me give a shit about the modern day part of this story. Honestly, I didn't even know this was possible, and I think that was the first and last time I did care about what was going on. I would like more trees to climb through in these games, please. Some games don't need to be full of new ideas to set the world alight, they just kind of need to wrap everything up nicely, and that's exactly what kind of game Assassin's Creed Revelations is. The Constantinople setting is rich and atmospheric, and the game ties together years of storytelling in a super satisfying way, acting as a beautiful send-off for Ezio and Altair. Some new mechanics are a little unnecessary, but the emotional payoff more than makes up for them. It's not the boldest move that Ubisoft could have made with Assassin's Creed, but as a conclusion, it comprehensively nails the landing. Brotherhood is where Assassin's Creed really found its stride. Rome is a dream playground for you to mess around in, the Brotherhood system makes you feel like you're building some kind of Assassin's Avengers team, and Ezio is firing on all cylinders here. Everything is done with just so much confidence, with tighter missions, smooth combat, and that sense of running a city-wide resistance. It's the game that proved Assassin's Creed could, and frankly should, be a franchise that runs long enough to stagnate like, half a decade later. Oh, but the fun we had. Hey, you want to talk about confident video games? Assassin's Creed Black Flag feels like someone Google translated the word assassin badly and ended up with pirates for some reason. But oh my Jesus, it works so unbelievably well. Naval combat, which was already a proven good idea from AC3, is one of the best things that's ever happened to this franchise, and I can't tell you how stunning the Caribbean looks, especially after so many games of looking at buildings and cities. There's so much to do here, but it all feels natural and basically never gets boring, which is practically unheard of for an Assassin's Creed game. Edward Kenway, you are doing wonderful work. Quite simply, Assassin's Creed 2 has been the gold standard for this franchise for a really long time. This is the moment where everything clicked, and mechanically, this is some really meaty gameplay. Whereas the first game was kind of a proof of concept, Assassin's Creed 2 comes in swinging with a richer story, an absolutely gorgeous version of Renaissance Italy, and Ezio Auditore, just one of the most well-rounded protagonists from the last 20 years of gaming. He's a cocky prick at the start, and he grows into a legendary assassin through an entire game's worth of hardship and growth, and it feels so earned. All those varied missions, all that running and jumping around Florence and Venice, it's satisfying in a way that makes Assassin's Creed 2 the gold standard for action-adventure games from the late 2000s. This is the premium shit that we dreamt of and the crown jewel in the Assassin's Creed franchise. How do we get games this good again?